What are we gonna do? We've got citizens living in trash cans on toxic dumps, bums being zapped by drones.
You know, the life expectancy on the street is 37.
We're overrun with criminals. I found a way to fund the jails.
Panopticon TV. Drama's never been so real.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I'm your host Matthew Pejkovic and this is episode number 205. Out now on video on demand is Division 19, a sci-fi thriller set in a dystopian future where prisons have been turned into online portals where the public get to choose what prisoners eat, where, watch and who they fight. When star prisoner Harden Jones, played by Jamie Draven, escapes, the authorities stop at nothing to track him down while a resistant group ramps up their attack on the system. Gritty, relevant and thought-provoking, Division 19 is recommended viewing for those who like their sci-fi with a political and social pulse. And joining me now to talk about Division 19 is the film's writer and director Suzie Halewood. Suzie, thank you very much for joining me today.
No, thank you very much for having me on.
This film has such an interesting concept, but what I find really intriguing is that you started writing this screenplay years and years ago, before a lot of the technological aspects about the film and the commentary about a lot of the technological aspects have even been made. What inspired you to write the screenplay in the first place? And as things were progressing in the real world, how many times did you have to go back and kind of add stuff and make stuff new with your film?
Well, it was really the sort of changes in the law after the 9/11. You know, you had you're Australian, aren't you? Sorry. There was the Patriot Act here in the US, and then in the UK, Tony Blair was, trying to bring in all manner of new rules like bio-passports and swabbing. You know, you could actually be swabbed. Somebody I know was swabbed just because they used the wrong travel card, and it was always kind of, trying to keep people controlled, and can we find out where everybody is as though this is somehow going to stop a terrorist attack, which obviously it doesn't. You know, this goes on. All the additional things they brought in here, for example, it doesn't stop somebody going into a school and killing people, or the guy in Vegas. You just can't stop the random few, not by this kind of social profiling. So I was kind of very angry about that. And in the UK, they were bringing in things like bio passports and RFID chips for kids. I wouldn't have believed this had a friend of mine not shown me a letter that her kid was given to bring home to check with your parents if it's okay to get an radio frequency identification chip. No, it shouldn't be all right. Because at what stage do you say, okay, you put a chip in and then you can, make sure your kid's all right and where they are? And I can understand that as a parent. But then in the end, how do you know if you're going to a local doctor, or if there's a one chip going in, there's two chips, maybe your new kid's 16 and they want the chip out.
Yep.
You just don't know what's really going on. And I think that even though I'm a sort of quite a cheerful person, I think however cynical you are, I don't think you're going to be far off the mark.
I remember at one point it seemed like the UK, or London especially, it seemed like there was CCTV cameras everywhere, especially post-London bombing and such. Is that still the case now? Is that still very much a heavily kind of surveillance kind of city?
Yeah, I mean, actually, when I first started writing this, we were the third most surveilled place, and not even in cameras, but I mean in terms of watching your citizens, after China and Russia,
Wow.
And we had more cameras. So they say in the UK and London, there's 6 rats per person and there's 6 person per camera. Now, I don't know whether the camera thing is true, and obviously some of them aren't necessarily operational, but you're supposed to be on, if you go out, you'll only be not on surveillance camera for 20% of the time that you're walking through the streets of London, which I understand why there's some kind of the security element. But, when someone gets killed, like there was a famous murder years ago, Jill Dando, that was shot on her doorstep. She was a reporter on Crime Watch. Well, you can tell what she ate before she was killed, where she went to shop, but it didn't stop someone shooting her on the doorstep. So it's not a solution. And that's why in the film you have these kids that live on the roofs, because it's the only place there isn't surveillance, the sewers and the roofs or anywhere outside the city. Because everything you do now is like with loyalty cards, I try to not have the same travel pass because people put it on a credit card, they know where you go, who your friends are. There's so many ways of finding this out that a lot of it obviously is sold for marketing purposes. But, if anyone says, well, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to do anything wrong, I think, yeah, but it's when the state does something wrong that you have to worry about it.
Yeah.
It's amazingly timely, and I wish it hadn't happened, that Julian Assange was arrested. You know, this is a guy who did stick up as an individual, unless there's, and he's, of course, he's one of yours, isn't he? And unless you stick up as a group, which is effectively what the kids on the roofs message is, and I don't mean literally people on roofs who are then going to bring down the government, but all of us, taxpayers, down tools, demand what you want, but we don't. We just go along kind of sleepwalking to our graves with our loyalty cards and go, yeah, take my data, sell it.
Well, it's interesting because the film starts off with a kind of like a warning or almost kind of like a prophetic kind of message to have a look at ourselves and how we're kind of, well, I think the quote was stuffing our faces while watching our screens, which I actually found kind of funny because I was eating something at the time when I was watching it, so I was kind of looking around saying, well, who's looking at me right now? I'm just curious, how much of what is said, especially in that opening kind of monologue, is your projections about how we as a society consume our media, and very much so, like media these days is very much a communal thing. You know, social media I think is really taking over traditional kind of aspects. Before it's you can choose, you sit down, turn off the TV, turn on the TV. Now we are the TV. We are putting as much content as anyone else. And how much of what your characters are saying in that opening stanza is you projecting what your feelings are at the moment in regards to technology and our relationship to it?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, two of the things I'll just say from the points you've made. I mean, one of the things about this communication, when people are communicating online all the time, you know, we're losing sight, well, not losing sight, but we're losing the ability to use our animal instincts, if you like. You know, well, say there was a tsunami, it's a bad example, but tsunami when people didn't run away, but animals ran away, people lived in the hills ran away because, you know, we judge people by their mood and the way their eyebrow moves and all these kind of things we're not picking up on anymore. We are just looking at a screen. So I think you do lose that kind of human touch, not in the obvious sense of sitting in a cafe, but, you know, all these people saying, yeah, but there's lots of communication, but it's not physical communication, which is the way, you know, we don't lose sight of our kind of animal instincts. And the other point, just in terms of what you just said, you know, social media, it's almost like people feel like they don't exist unless they have an online presence. You know, everything matters. Everything has to be okay. You have to be, and well, it doesn't, does it? You know, in the end, you could say there's 1.3 billion people in China, billion, who don't give a damn about half the things that happen here in the West. Or they certainly do a lot more now. But the guy at the beginning, yes, he was added on a bit later, actually. We shot most of it in Detroit and then a bit in LA, and that was actually a pickup because, and you know, maybe it's confusing, I don't know, but to me, when I looked at the film, I was thinking, well, really, yeah, that is the bit I feel the most angry about, that, well, not angry at people, but his character is that person saying, look, you know, we are sitting around while the world burns.
Yep.
You know, I mean, who's going to stand up for Julian Assange? Probably Anonymous. And that would be great if they suddenly come out again and, you know, do something to defend him or to help him. But otherwise, people, once they're as individuals, you know, they get shot down for standing up against the state, like him and Manning and Snowden, and they shouldn't do. You know, there was a time when you could say whistleblowers maybe were a bad thing. I mean, I wouldn't say that, but I can understand how it's changed. Like, you wouldn't want to whistleblow on a government when they were at war with someone else. But, you know, bringing your government to account, you should be able to do that without ending up in jail or exonerate, you know.
It's an interesting, one of the interesting concepts that comes from your film is that in this world that you made, anonymity is a crime. People must register. You must be known. You were talking about when we were talking about the description of the movie about people getting chips placed in them so the government knows where they are, or time tracking, etc. I think that's really interesting because I think what we're going to see in the near future, especially on the online sphere, is that anonymity is going to be outlawed. Because I don't know if you've been following things that have been happening in Australia and New Zealand in regards to what happened with the New Zealand shooting in Christchurch and the online portals and such where a lot of people are anonymous and putting their stuff out there and such. I think things like that are going to lead to more people need to identify who they are online and such. Do you see that kind of happening as well in regards to anonymity? Because I actually think that in the future, not only that's going to happen, but something that's going to sell really quite a bit is privacy. I think apps and stuff like that that sells privacy from the online sphere is going to be a very big thing in the future.
Well, yeah, and I actually think that's a really good point. They'll probably turn that against you. There is a futuristic film, I can't remember what it's called now, but I think it's got Justin Timberlake in it. Where you can buy
In Time.
In Time, yes, thank you very much. The way you can buy back time. well, actually, in the future, maybe you're going to be buying back anonymity, because that's what happens, isn't it? With the ads, some ads pop up and they say, well, you have to pay to not have an ad. You have to pay to not have an ad. And in the future, you're going to have to buy back your anonymity. To take everything off about you online, it's going to cost you millions because it's everywhere. You can't take these things off. That thing I find really, but I don't ever think that anonymity will be okay. I don't think you'll ever be able to buy it back unless you've got that much money, because it's the only way that the state controls. With the divide and rule idea. It's like in pubs in the UK, a lot of them are closing down. I don't know about Australia, but because, pubs are dangerous. People go and sit around in pubs and plan revolutions. I'm sure that's what Guy Fawkes did, He probably planned his revolution then. But if you keep people separate, it's very much easier, even though you have online movements on Facebook, like with the Egyptian revolution, but then you can still find out what these people are doing and where they're meeting and infiltrate them. So, even though it feels like there's a power to it, I don't think this was answering the question that you asked, but in terms of Christchurch, the thing I find most shocking about that, I saw someone in the morning and she was saying, oh God, wasn't that footage terrible?
Yeah.
She was a young girl, but I'm like, why the hell were you watching the footage?
Yeah.
This is the problem with this, and in your the Prime Minister of New Zealand saying, we'll never mention this name. Thank God someone's finally cottoned on. Everyone turns these people into icons. There's photographs of them posing with their... this is all part of the sort of fame thing for 15 minutes. If you're a complete loser, which I think most of those people are, and then all of a sudden you can be famous for 15 minutes by shooting multiple people, and you've already prepared their kind of... the photographs of themselves that they are going to be expecting to be in The Guardian and all the other newspapers. It's crazy. And somehow that's a celebration. They become iconic.
Yeah, it definitely is crazy. I think it goes back to, no matter what type of media we had, though, even going back to the times of Bonnie and Clyde and the stuff they were doing, that became like a big, and that was like, what was available then, newspaper. I don't think even TV was even available then. Back then, I'm not 100% sure what the timeline and such. So it is very interesting how we make our greatest, our greatest devil sometimes our biggest celebrities. A character who kind of does that in your movies, Alison Doody's character. She plays kind of like the role of the head of this kind of big kind of like reality TV kind of conglomerate thing that's behind having these prisons turned into portals and people vote on. It's almost kind of like a Truman Show by way of District 9. It's kind of like has all those kind of facets in there. Now, Alison Doody, when I saw her name in the cast list for your movie, I was like really intrigued because I haven't seen her do stuff in quite a while, and just looking at her biography, it seems like Division 19 was a film where she's really starting to get her feet wet again in an acting pool. Getting her on board this movie, did you know of Alison beforehand? Did you always think that she'll be great for the role? Because, like I said, we haven't seen her for a while. She was known more for her work back in the Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade back in '89. How did it come about getting her cast in this movie?
Well, she when I did the first film, I did a film called Bigger Than Ben with Ben Barnes, and they had the same agent, Peter, at CAM, Peter Brooks. So I phoned him up. I love Alison Doody. I think she's fantastic. And I know this sounds crazy, but you always, when you look at an actor, you think, can I have a laugh with them? Because you're going to spend a lot of time with them. That's not why I would cast someone, but... So I phoned her up. He said, oh, yeah, I'll send her the script. She loved the script. And she phoned me up and she was going, there's so many people that I just read scripts and they're crap. And I like this one. So I think she'd had some, she's got, I think her husband died or something. I couldn't probably speak for her. But, I think that she'd been out of acting for a little bit. So it was great to come over. She came over to LA and we shot her scenes in LA and she was just fabulous. She is a really good laugh. And actually, people say now, oh, more of the sexy evil lady. But she really just pulls that off. And I think she's, she comes across as very intelligent. And Nielsen, to me, there are a lot of people who probably really think they're doing some good. Not, they think they're making things better. But they've gone so far, they don't know that anymore. Now, I wouldn't say that with, say, someone like Tony Blair, but there are almost, he was a sociopath. And so if you put him on a lie detector, he'd pass because he really believes what he's doing. Whereas for everybody else, it's a lie. So it's the same with her. She's thinking, but the consumerism's up, crime's down, this is working. Yeah, but it's just not natural. You're shoring off, everyone's personal, whatever they're called. I'm running out of words. Individuality, and dignity. And this is what I feel is lost a lot anyway. In present day, everything's very binary. You're either good or you're bad, or you've done something wrong or you haven't, or well, it just doesn't work like that, does it? Some people who are bad do good things, and some people who are good do bad things, and I don't know why there isn't just a bit more nuance. And what I like about her character is there is no nuance,
Well, I think because a lot of people in those positions rely on results as opposed to the methods to get those results. I mean, the line that you quoted before, crime is down, consumerism is up, that's all pure statistical stuff that's on a piece of paper. And when you have that, you feel justified to do things.
Yeah.
Especially like she was doing, her character was doing to the movie. Another actor that you have in this movie is Linus Rocahe. And what's really interesting about... So, from what I've seen on the timeline of this film was shot back in 2017 and had a bunch of festival runs back then. Is that correct, Susan?
Yeah, it actually shot a year and a half before that. It took a long time to put it together in so much as, it was just special effects. I had never done special effects before, and actually it was a bit of a shocker. You think you can shoot a film for 6 weeks, edit it for, 18 weeks, and then, do the a bit more post-production, and you could probably get it, within 3 to 4 or 5 months. But trying to find visual effects people that I could get and afford took a long time, and I found a couple of kids in New York in the end, and once they'd put their visual effects on, then I did have to do a bit more of a recut. But yes, a rough cut went to Fantasporto, and it was just brilliant to be invited there because they've got such a good history with sci-fi filmmakers, and they kind of found all these early directors who are doing incredibly well now, and they're lovely. Whether or not it's a sensible thing to show a rough cut at an early on, I don't know, but never mind. So we shot a pickup day just after that. Oh, no, we didn't. We shot a pickup day just before that, but then we recut that in as well for Boston.
So at this time, Linus Rocahe, he's known as a character actor. I think the biggest thing he was part of was Batman Begins. He played Thomas Wayne in that movie. Since you shot your film and it was in post and such, he's become now a cult actor because of the work in Mandy. Which came out last year. When you see something like that, when you see one of your main actors, your main selling points to market and your movie kind of blow up in that way, because I think being a cult actor has just as much currency as being a movie star, because there's a loyalty attached to that actor. A movie star can be fleeting depending on the trend of the day. A cult actor stays just at the same register, but that register is really powerful and can really reach a lot of people. So once one of your actors becomes a cult star, and that name is attached to it, what difference does that make in having eyeballs in front of your movie?
Do you know what, I don't actually know whether it ever does, because obviously if it's something very different, it's like when Ben Barnes did Bigger Than Ben, it was his first film, and nobody had heard of him, he'd be quite happy to admit to that, and then he did Prince Caspian, which is, a kid's film, and he suddenly became massive, but the same type of people are never going to go and see a low-budget horror about a Russian guy addicted to drugs, and actually Disney or whoever it was that released Caspian were kind of a bit wary about him doing interviews. So I don't know. I think it all helps, but whether or not those are people that would then click on and watch the film, I'm not sure. I mean, Bigger Than Ben, now that Ben's become bigger here, and he's done The Punisher and stuff like that, and the other kid in it is Hero Finds Tiffin, and I don't know whether you've heard of him yet, but he's coming out in a film here called After. He's got like over 1 million subscribers on Instagram or something. He's going to be huge, I think. There's no question about it. He's going to be like a next Robert Pattinson or something. Now, things like that can help because that kind of, fan base would maybe then buy films that they hadn't seen, that he did a bit younger and stuff like that. So, well, I'm hoping that will make a difference. But in terms of Linus, not quite sure. He's done so many things, and I loved what he brought. He sort of added this kind of, I think he did add a nuance, which was someone who actually thought, instead of just going to get these guys, once he spoke to them, you're like, Christ, I'm the dinosaur here. Maybe they've got a point. And, he has got to consider the electorate. So if they suddenly become popular, he's going to listen to what they have to say. That's the cynical view. Or the other view is, actually, they're talking some sense and they've done their maths. And they, it's like with a Laffer curve or Laffer curve. When tax was less than it was now, they collected more money. Because at some point, which was 26.7%, people just give up paying tax. They're like, sod it, we'll hide it. Whereas up to that point, they felt it was reasonable for the service they got.
I want to just take a leap in regards to an inspiration on the film, especially in regards to like the social hierarchy that's in the movie. So you have Linus's and Alison's characters. They very much come from British Irish background. We know that just by the accents, etc.
Yeah.
Then you have the rebellion, American accents. Is this in any way inspired by Spartacus? Because Spartacus did exactly the same kind of thing, where the slaves were Americans and then the people were in, like, the Romans, for example, were UK actors. Was that something directly inspired from there, or is that just something that came about just naturally?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I wish it was inspired from Spartacus. I didn't know that. Although I've seen it twice. I probably never noticed. No, in fact, Toby, the guy that screams at people at the beginning, he's English as well, but he lives here now and he does an American accent. It wasn't. The biggest problem that we had was, all the discussions I had with Jamie Draven, and are we going to do this in an American accent? Because it made sense, Will, his brother, was American, but we'd never cast the brother then. And originally I'd cast another English guy, Matthew McNulty, and then he couldn't do it when we were filming. But of course they were both from Manchester. It kind of made sense, So, no, the accents, I just think it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because people pick up on that, and quite rightly so. But anywhere in life, if you go and sit in a cafe tomorrow, everybody around you, there'll be 20 different accents. I mean, nobody lives anymore in the same town, not really. So, you'd never have the same accents in a film. I think the biggest problem was the two brothers, but then they haven't seen each other for 10 years, and maybe, I can trick it and say, well, yes, it's all becoming more Americanized, but no, they were incidental, really, other than Linus Rochahe's character was loosely based on, wouldn't it have been nice if Tony Blair had a reasonable side or a level of benevolence.
I'm always impressed by a independent filmmaker's ability to take a small budget and make a film that's larger than life in regards to how it looks on screen. And I just wanted to ask you a few questions just in regards to how you made that so with your movie. First of all, when it came to the scenes of where we're looking at the dystopian kind of future in front of us, the external scenes especially, where did you shoot that?
That was all Detroit. I mean, I was very lucky. The DP I worked with on the first film, Ben Molden, he's a brilliant photographer, and he just makes things look much bigger, He's not into let's do coverage, he's into let's make this shot look amazing. And when I got to Detroit, John Collins, who was the designer, phoned up out of the blue. I didn't know anything about him, and I looked, and he said, look, I'm really interested in doing this, can you send me the script? So I sent him the script, and I looked him up overnight. I'm like, Hunger Games? Christ, why does he want to do a low-budget sci-fi? So he phoned up the next morning and said, yeah, really want to do it. Brilliant. He turned up, they got on really well, and they both were amazing. So Detroit, when I saw pictures of Detroit in a magazine when I was in London, I thought, oh my God, that is it. You don't even have to design anything. I mean, as a representation, sadly for Detroit, although obviously it's picking up now, of a sort of a crumbling future, I mean, that was it. It had happened to it really fast, And by the time we got there, it was probably like, I don't think it was a third of the police force and the ambulances and all the rest of it weren't even working anymore. I remember a police car came up to us and all the paint's peeling off, even when they're trying to, look at our ID. And of course it had gone bankrupt, the day we arrived, which everyone thought was my fault, which nothing to do with me. People were, what have you done? So that was a bit of a shocker. So, but in terms of the way it looked, obviously all those huge crumbling buildings and monoliths, against a city of Detroit that is now building itself up. I mean, you couldn't make it up. And we filmed in the what's it called, the temple that had 1,600 rooms in it, the Masonic temple. So literally, there was one morning when John had to find a toilet bowl for a scene that actually didn't make it in the film, but with Clark Peters. And he said, I couldn't believe it. I opened the door and there were 100 toilet bowls. Where do you find that in the world? Oh, the Masonic Temple. He loved doing it there.
So what is that, the Masonic Temple? Was that kind of like a building that was being constructed and left alone because of the bankruptcy issues?
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. It was my pronunciation. It's the Masonic Temple. Okay. And it was obviously they had a big with the Masons there, I guess. But now it was, I think there's 1,327 rooms or something. I mean, It is gargantuan. And they have two, it was a proper... I think the guy that saved it or paid for it in the end was the guy from White Stripes. Is it Jack...
Jack White, yeah.
Anyway, yes, Jack White, yes. Because they had a lot of taxes to pay and all the rest of it. But now they kind of use it for filming and concerts. But they do have two massive rooms which are like Houses of Parliament. With the high altar and where the guy sits. I don't know enough about the Masons. But fascinating. So that is a brilliant place. In fact, that's when I got there. That's when the Ryan Gosling film Lost River, they were filming and using that as an office, which is why we ended up there, because it was the same producer.
And when you were in Detroit at that time, was that when the water crisis hit over there?
No, that might have been before we were there. What with the poisoning?
Well, I'm just saying in regards to they couldn't get fresh water for a while there, couldn't they? I'm not even sure whether they can now. Getting a supply of fresh water for even people to drink over there, and a lot of celebrities, especially Detroit-born, Michigan-born celebrities and sports stars, were driving around with water tanks, bottles of water, handing out stuff like that. Because that's such an interesting part of the States, because you talked before about the conditions of some of the buildings, because that was a place that was very... the auto industry is very central to the success of that place, and when that collapsed, the whole city just collapsed around it. So it really is, it really is just like a prime kind of location stuff for a film like this, and what you're trying to bring across. When it came to shooting the parkour scenes. And look, and whenever I watch anything like that, it's always impressive to me, because I'm the kind of guy that struggles to get off the floor after playing with my kids. So whenever I see anyone running around on rooftops doing that, you know, it just I just find I'm fascinated and just kind of like at the same time just envious of it as well. When it comes to shooting that kind of stuff, what goes into that? I mean, does it take a while to kind of like figure out we're going to go from here to there? Are you putting your faith in the hands of experienced people who know how to do all that stuff? Talk to me a little bit about that, because I just find that stuff really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it was. The thing is, because I was trying to say that if you're trying to keep off surveillance, the chances are that the only places there are no cameras are either on the rooftops, outside the city, or in the sewers. You know, I wanted these kids that lived on the rooftops. But the problem with then not having professionals, which we did in the end, is it's just too dangerous. Yeah. So I got the world champion parkour. It wasn't supposed to be parkour in all honesty, but I eventually did get the world champion parkour guy, Chase Armitage. He was, I don't know, world champion a couple of years before we filmed that. And he was brilliant. I said, do you want to go to Detroit? Yes. I've spoken to him quite a few times about it. And he came over and he trained people up when there were very good parkour kids there, actually, in Detroit. Really good. In fact, one of them, not on our film, nearly died a few weeks after we left, because he kind of jumped onto a bridge to pick up his girlfriend's bag or something, and he got hit by a train, knocked off the bridge, landed in the water face down, and a canoeist just happened to be there, you know. So this canoeist picked him up, broke every bone in his body, but he's fine now. But yeah, so the training of them, so Chase sort of helped them train in Detroit, although they were very good anyway. And then we did a bit more parkour. We did a bit of parkour in London, actually. But then there was a very good two guys who did the sort of, whatever it's called. What is it called? Yes, that helped train for the action sequences all excellent. Mark Cass and Dan Lameau. So once we sort of trained them in terms of where they were going, you know, following the truck or whatever, luckily they all had kind of, you know, qualifications if anything had happened, because they were all kind of trained stunt guys. Because if you're a parkour, apparently you're automatically got this kind of stunt pass. So that was less of a headache. But in reality, I probably would have just had guys that didn't look like parkour guys, you know, living on the roofs. But it just wasn't real. It wasn't realistic for safety issues.
Well, it works really well because you need your guys in the rebellion to be mobile and moving around and such. You spoke before about the struggles in regards to visual effects and the process in regards to getting that all done, especially coming from independent resources and a budget as well. Now that you've had a taste of doing that kind of stuff, is that something that you'll be willing to do again? Because or are you going to step away from kind of like that kind of sci-fi world building kind of stuff that relies so heavily on the visual effects aspect?
Well, yes, I'm glad you asked that. I find it really complicated. I remember seeing, I think it was Danny Boyle, it was Sunshine, and I can't remember why I forgot this thing that he said, God, you know, visual effects is so complicated, I'm never going to do it again, or something like that. And I wish I'd sort of just taken that in a bit more. Because, the thing I couldn't quite get my head around is how many layers you've got then. And I don't just mean in the physical sense, but the story sense. So once you add on a visual effect on something, it might look like the simplest thing in the world at the end of it, but then you've got to retell that bit of story because it's saying something else about the scene. So then you need to kind of do a bit of a recut. So that bit I found a bit, that was a bit daunting. And no, I wouldn't really want to do visual effects, but I do have a TV series which is sci-fi, and I'd be quite happy to not be, directing that. I just like the ideas that go into sci-fi. I just like how far can you take this idea, and often that is into the future if you're going to carry it to the obvious conclusion. I always think that it doesn't matter how dark your view is, you're going to get there because that's just what it's like. The type of people. There's a brilliant book called, I think it's called Wounded Leaders. It's about the type of person that wants to actually run a country, and they really aren't fit. But that's what it's. So, any dark views you have about the future are going to end up being sci-fi, aren't they? Because they're not here yet. But no, I wouldn't really want to do another sci-fi, but I love them. So, who knows if I had a bigger budget.
Final question. We talked about technology a lot in regards to the plot of your movie. I want to talk about now in regards to distribution of getting your movie out there. I've talked to a lot of independent filmmakers, and a lot of the ways that they get their film out there is video on demand, streaming, downloading. Suzie, you've been in the game for quite a while now. You've seen different type of technological aspects and different ways of getting films out there. When it comes to downloading, streaming, etc., as you as an independent filmmaker, do you find this as an incredible benefit to get your stuff out there, or are you still a fan very much of the cinema experience and trying to get your films in the cinema as well?
Well, no, that's a really good question. This is where I'm sort of, again, I think it depends on the film. I was very lucky that I contacted Keith Leopard at Uncorked, and he got back to me and he said, yes, I'd quite, do a small release for this, which is obviously normally for the VOD, but nevertheless, it's a cinema release, and that's absolutely great. So brilliant, because it was the first film that really had released in America. I mean, One More Kiss I wrote, and I think that did come out here, but I think that if it was a small bit, like the first film I did, Bigger Than Ben, for example, now I could now release that on video on demand, and because there's 2 actors in it who've got Instagram followers of over 1 million each, that would be a whole of the ball game. So I don't think it's an ego thing about getting it something, say, on the cinema, but that's what you want to see. And what I'd like to set up really is a kind of a company that tries to encourage films to get more coverage with theatrical, because that's how you make it. I mean, when somebody reviews your film, say, like you would have watched it I don't know whether you watched it on a TV or a laptop, but obviously someone's not seeing it as you did it, and the poor old DP and all the framing and the colouring and all the rest of it, and then no one ever sees it like you wanted to be seen in the first place. So I am actually trying to set something up which is a filmmaker-led company that finds different ways of promoting and getting films into cinemas. Because if you're if you're an independent cinema chain, the chances are, I read this, I don't know whether this is true, but huge films often won't even, they'll keep all the money, but the cinema chain keeps the money that they make from the concessions. But then if you're a tiny film, you'll end up four-walling it. So you're paying the cinema. It seems crazy. Whereas actually, if you could do a deal with cinemas, that they screen the film, but they actually keep a percentage of the domestic as a result of the increased sales, then, they're going to promote the film as well. And I do think that's the way forward, because we have got online. We don't have to rely on anymore with the festival circuit. I don't mean in terms of, obviously everybody wants to get awards because it helps. But in terms of, if you go to Cannes or any of the festivals where films are sold, I mean, it's really expensive. So if you've got a little film that was made, like this was actually made for just over $1 million. I know it says 2 million, but it wasn't. It was 1.1. If that's made for that much money, by the time the sales agent sold, say, 500,000, they're probably keeping about 40% of that. It's very difficult to get your money back with the old standard way. Whereas and the other big problem to me is, all these bigger companies, say like Netflix, I love Netflix, they're great, they pay filmmakers, but, they've got all the data. And what you really want to be doing is building up fan bases, and so that you own that with all your other filmmakers, because then you can be promoting your own films. Because most actors, or all the ones I've worked with, are very loyal, and they'll help promote the film as well, and they're the ones with the Instagram followers. So I do think there has to be a different way, a solution, but I do think as well it depends from film to film. If you make a very low-budget film that you don't get a cinema release for, I don't see that that's a slap in the face for the film. You might choose to say, actually, I'm going to make way more money video on demand, because there was one film, sorry, I'm wittering, that I know of a few years back. I think it was Death of a President, and the Weinsteins, I might have got this slightly wrong, but they were going to take it on. Then they realised that the president, George Bush at the time, gets shot in the film. I mean, it is called Death of a President. So they decided not to do it, and the people put it online and made a load of money in a few hours, a few million. So, yeah, it's just, of course, that had a great title for publicity point of view. So if you're very good, you've got very good marketing people, I don't see you would have to have a cinema release, but I think you would attract filmmakers to your new company if you could guarantee a small release.
Well, the film is Division 19. It's available now on video on demand. Do like the people to start the film say, stuff your faces while watching it on your screen. And for everyone out there, I just want to say thank you very much for listening. And to you, Suzie, thank you very much for talking to me today about your film. It's been a great discussion, and hopefully we can get some eyeballs in front of your movie.
No, I appreciate that. Listen, thanks very much for talking to me, Matthew. Appreciate it very much.